Radio Show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV Radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Vision radio show. I want to welcome you to Monday, March 7th, 2016. This week actually marks my 6-month anniversary of being on the radio, so I want to thank the staff and the producers of UCY.TV for giving me this venue. I think it has come in a very timely manner. Shortly after I started my radio show, I discovered it had been going on. There was a catastrophe in St. Louis, and I had not heard of it. I was actively engaged as a, quote, anti-nuke activist for 2 years and had not heard about St. Louis. So that's how well the media suppresses the information in our country regarding anything. The new N-word, the new N-word is really the R word. There's no way we can talk about radiation at all or radiological exposure without being suppressed in one way or another. And for that, I really thank our producers for giving this radio station really the hallmark of having several really great programs that talk about the harm that nuclear pollution does. Wednesdays are our interview days, and this day, on Monday, Wednesdays is interview, and Mondays I have dedicated to St. Louis. This morning I have the really great honor of having on again Mrs. Dawn Chapman. She is one of the moms of STL, Just Moms STL. And Dawn, are you there?
I'm here, Lonnie.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming back. As you know, I'm pretty dedicated to this. I feel like having the people of St. Louis on my radio show every week is putting some kind of political pressure, just public exposure to this issue that, in my view, I think that St. Louis is an indication of everything that in America, like we are St. Louis. The lies that's happened in St. Louis, the disregard for human life, that's happening everywhere across America, and it's time for our elected officials to start representing us and helping us instead of protecting the corporations.
Oh, absolutely. And, we're very grateful that you give us this opportunity on your show. As a mom, I only just found out about this 3 years ago, and I live less than 2 miles from one of the sites with radioactive waste that's just been allowed to sit on the surface for over 40 years. So any opportunity we get, even if it, here, if it seems like a small one on one of the local shows, we'll take it because we're trying to wake up the moms. I think that's really one of our focuses, because you mentioned, there is such, everybody has a hard time talking about radiation. The media has a hard time covering it and or wanting to cover it. It's the local moms, I think, that if we can wake them up, and in other cities as well, then they'll come forward, and then, we can join hands and we can put a stop to this.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. But one of the things on one of my Fridays, I'm like, well, where are the dads of St. Louis? This is one of the things that strikes me as when I look at the crowds, it really is a lot of the moms. Like, but where are the dads? Like,
they're here. They're watching the kids.
They're watching
a lot of the dads stay home and watch the kids while the moms go and do the meetings. Our dads are very, very much involved, and we have uncles, we have aunts, and we have grandparents. So
I had Jesse Koenig on. He was a brother and a son who's really spoke quite well about the exposure. And one of the things he discussed when he was interviewed was the fact that people don't like to talk about it in St. Louis. It's kind of taboo. He's a hairdresser, and he said you can't just chit chat about that. That's very taboo. You kind of have to tiptoe around it.
He's absolutely right. And, it's interesting because I think people, like Jesse's very involved now. I'm involved. Karen's involved. The people that are involved, occasionally people will recognize us, and they'll come up to us in a store, our neighbors, and say, hey, how's that landfill going? Or, and then you'll say, well, and you'll start to talk, and you get the picture really quick that it isn't really something people are comfortable talking about. And that is one of the things that I don't know if it's because they feel like this problem is just so big that they can't tackle it, or if they are embarrassed because it is kind of a taboo subject right now in St. Louis. I haven't been able to put my finger on why that is, but he's absolutely correct. That is very true.
Well, look, I started reading a book over the weekend that came to me. It's called The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. I read his original book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is a new, improved version with new information. He wrote that book, I think, in 2000, 2004, something like that. I read it when it came out. At the end, I wanted to share this with the audience because this is why we're doing it. At the end of the introduction, he wrote this paragraph. Tom Paine inspired American revolutionaries when he wrote, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace." These words are important today as they were in 1776. My goal in this new book is nothing less than Paine's, to inspire and empower us all to do whatever it takes to lead the way to peace for our children. And I think that's exactly what you and the moms of St. Louis have been doing. Like, you didn't just go, oh, wow, that's really bad, and let someone else handle it. You guys have dug in really to protect your own children. For real.
Absolutely. And, that is such a powerful quote because that is actually, Karen does this wonderfully. When we go to an elected official's office and when we go there, a lot of times what people don't understand is we're bringing documents when we're heavily talking to them. We're like, look at this. Look how bad this is. It is a very intense meeting that we have with these elected officials, and the last thing Karen says before she leaves is, you know what, I'm sorry, but this is happening to you. You are elected to office. Now you know about this. Now it's your responsibility to fix it. I don't want my daughter in here 20 years from now in this same office speaking to you or whoever's holding it that we need to do something about this issue. We need to do something about it now. It's the responsibility of the people who know about it now. And, that's so many times, at least in our city in St. Louis, it does feel as though you'll have these like little bursts. Certainly I didn't know about it, until 3 years ago, but there were other people who did. There were times when, the news would do stories about something and, people would talk about it maybe for a couple of months and then it would just die. The momentum would just die down and then you wouldn't hear from it. And then another story would be written maybe 4 years later and then, there would be whispers. For me, we're trying to create something here, and we're trying to keep it from dying. And that's very hard to do when the media won't pick it up.
Well, this is the thing. This is why on my radio show I do discuss social engineering, because social engineering is a huge factor in how we're all lulled back into ignoring. I wouldn't say that we're asleep. People are very, very aware, but they're lulled into ignoring it. They just they move on. We've been kind of trained that it's yesterday's news and yesterday's story, and and this other underlying current that we all have in the back of our heads, that if it was that bad, our elected officials wouldn't ignore it. That's the stunning part.
And that's huge. We hear that all the time, Lonnie, all the time. If it's that bad, then EPA would do something about it. And what's happening now in Flint and what happened at the Animas River and whatnot, that kind of exposure helps us, because we can look to those and say, people, it's hard for them to fathom that if EPA knew there was something wrong with the water, they would let people drink it. Or
right.
For that matter, if EPA thought there might be something wrong with the water and they let people drink it without testing it. This kind of stuff happens, and it's very frustrating for people, but I'm starting to use this phrase, if you are in the middle of something like this, if this is happening to you or your community, don't expect that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and the Avengers are going to land on your front lawn and take care of it for you.
Exactly, or that you're just going to go knock on someone like Governor Jay Nixon's door and give him the facts, and he'll go, "Oh my God, we have to fix this." I mean,
right.
That's the shocking part. I mean, this is why I constantly say, I still say this. If I lived in St. Louis, I would be organizing sit-ins on his office, because you definitely need to have a state of emergency declared for the people of St. Louis. That, for all of the progress that has been made over the months since I've been covering this story with the Senate bill getting passed, and I believe that there's a mounting pressure to pass the House bill. Am I correct on that?
There is. We have one naughty person. One person, and he's a great Democrat, standing in the way.
Who is it?
It is Congressman Frank Pallone of New Jersey, and we are bombarding his office. And I'll tell you, it might take a couple of moms to hop on a plane and go to D.C. or New Jersey and meet with him. We have got to get this guy to budge, and that is the frustrating thing. Is listen. Yes, you're going to have to form a group. If you find yourself in this situation, you're absolutely going to have to form a group. And you are going to have to go to these elected officials' offices, and you're going to have to lobby, you're going to have to push. You're going to have to hop a flight or two, or a train or a car. It's an uncomfortable fight. And you're going to have to be persistent, and you're just going to have to knuckle down and do it. Because no one else is going to do it for you.
Well, I have to say, Dawn, this constantly shocks me that our elected officials know that there's a very serious catastrophic problem in St. Louis. They are not denying that there's a catastrophic problem. What they're doing is just allowing people to live in an area where they know that there's a high probability that they're going to get sick and possibly die. They know that. And this is why I just started reading John Goffman's book, an old book written in 1990, on my YouTube channel. It's called Radiation-Induced Cancer from Low-Dose Exposure, an Independent Analysis. That information is suppressed. And we need to be able to have information so people can talk, with some clarity to our elected officials, because it's incomprehensible to me that elected officials in St. Louis are not putting pressure on Frank Pallone themselves.
We have a few that are. I will say Congressman Lacey Clay, those two are button heads behind the scene. I have heard for a fact that, but this guy is just
What is Pallone's objections?
That is the crazy thing. This guy is from New Jersey. He's a great Democrat, and I'll tell you what, this guy, New Jersey has a Superfund site on every block just about. So this guy knows a thing or two about the ridiculousness. He's not a friend of the agencies, from what I can tell. I don't know if somebody has gotten to him or what his objection is, but he has got to let go. He is going to be the cause of a catastrophic event in St. Louis if he doesn't let go of this bill and turn this site over to the people who have the ability to at least make it somewhat better on the site and stabilize it. I mean, the site is a critical patient. You have a fire next to radioactive waste. This is a patient in critical condition, and it needs some sort of triage right now to stabilize it so we can figure out what the heck we're going to do to keep it from getting into the drinking water and to keep it from getting into the Missouri River. I mean, the people who can do that right now are the Army Corps of Engineers and their formerly utilized Sites Remedial Action Program. And they are the best that we have. They are all that we have in our nation to handle this. And he is the one person. We thought the Republicans, we thought that the company would reach out to the Republicans and they would be the obstacle, and it's not. It's this one great Democrat.
Well,
and
he is
I
from
hope
New
he's
Jersey.
listening.
I mean, New Jersey is somewhat of a corrupt state. Maybe it has to do with the fuse wrap. Maybe it has to do with the fuse wrap funding. Maybe someone's told him if he approves this, the fuse wrap funding for his own state will be reduced. Maybe
Well, I'm sure they've told him that, but the thing is this bill, it's a very unique bill. This is a great bill. It's a polluter pays bill. In this bill, the Republic Services, Exelon and Cotter, and the DOE, who is partially responsible, they will be the ones to fund the cleanup of this. And they have the ability to get that money up front so that it is not. I mean, this is a budget-neutral bill. So, I mean, maybe somebody is telling him that. You could certainly be correct, but shame on him for not doing his homework. Even the Congressional Research Service has put their stamp of approval on this bill. I mean, so he should have absolutely no objections, and he does. And we're going to push him hard this week. And we're going to do what we do, which is we're going to have moms. We're going to have moms call. We're going to have kids write letters. We're going to swamp his office with real people, because whatever it is, whatever reason, people before profits.
Well, I will tell you what, just a quick look on the internet between Exelon and New Jersey. New Jersey just approved a $6.8 billion merger last year with Pepco Holdings, which means that these people know all of the people. This is, I mean, you can almost just see the money being transferred from one office to the next I mean, there's no reason for Congressman Pallone to be holding out like this and keep a bill from even getting voted on. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's unreasonable.
It really is, and it's getting. I don't know if it could be a desperation thing. We know that Republic's getting desperate. They've served myself and another mom with a subpoena. We got served. We need to appear. They want everything. They want all our emails, all our Facebook, all our documents. They want everything we have about this site, and they are not being specific. It's a very broad request, and then they want us for a 7-hour deposition, which is hilarious because everything I have about this site, everything we have is on Facebook, and it's all public. It's on our website. I mean, we don't, everything that we have and that we've learned, we put out there for people to absorb and read and try and understand what's happening. So, I mean...
Well, what action? Let me back up here. They've subpoenaed it again. In what action? Is there some action going on against them?
Yeah, in a private litigation. So there's private nuisance litigation. I don't know if it's all nuisance. I'm not really sure what the actual litigation is against them, but they're being sued by residents that live closer than I do, right on top of the landfill there, and I'm being called by Republic, which is interesting, again, because I'm not part of that litigation, and because I live 2 miles south, so I don't live right on top of it where they live. So, we're working right now with our lawyers and whatnot, but it's as a mom who's never done this before, when your doorbell rings, on a Thursday night, 8:45 in the evening after wakes your kids up and you're getting served, I mean, it's a moment. I got to tell you, that's a moment.
They want to intimidate you, but my guess would be just the guess. This is just the wild guess. If you're going to be called to testify, they probably want to put you on the stand and say, so that you have to say, no, I have not been affected by radiation. But that's actually probably not true. Your children probably have been affected.
And that would be my answer. My answer would simply be, have you been affected? My answer would be, you left this crap sitting on the surface for 40 years. The chances that I've been affected are pretty high, as are anybody else who's lived, driven past the site, worked on the site, worked next to the site, or in the surrounding areas. You can't leave this stuff on the surface and pretend that there won't be some sort of consequence that people are going to face decades later. That's not how this works.
My educated guess would be, after having read 2 of John Goffman's books, that you could probably pull your medical records against any. John Goffman has a couple of books about the exposure of low-level radiation, really good technical books. You could probably compare your medical records with those books and find a correlation. I mean, there's probably a direct, I don't know any of your medical history between you and your family, but my guess is you guys have been affected, and this is, in fact, one of my theses of this radio show. The way we conduct the entire cover-up of how nuclear pollution harms our planet is a concerted effort. Like the moms of St. Louis, the Westlake landfill, the Coldwater Creek page is a perfect example. Yep. It was not until Coldwater Creek, the people who actually got educated, became doctors and scientists, met up on Facebook and went, wait a minute, it's too unusual for us to have these weird diseases. They started creating their own data and pieced it. This is something our government still to this day does not do. We do not keep accurate track. And in fact, in the NRC documents and in the IAEA, their documents, they specifically state that if you can point to any other effect of the negative effects of radiation, radiation is taken off the table entirely. Yep. So if GMOs cause a problem and so does radiation, they'll just say it's all caused by GMOs.
Oh, absolutely. And, and that is the key for the listeners to understand. I mean, those were a group of educated moms who got together after a high school reunion and started that dialogue, because we do what moms do. Moms do that. Moms look around them. Well, so-and-so, maybe not dads so much. I think some of the dads have, and they certainly understand it now, but moms know. We keep track of people who are sick on our street. It's in the back of our head, and sometimes we just, it's just too much of a coincidence to ignore, and you start looking back on it, and that's what happened. And the interesting thing about that is, when you look at the maps that have come out and you look at the state surveys, that is something that the ATSDR keeps saying, well, it's going to be very difficult. We could probably come back and prove that there is a problem, and that people have been affected, but it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint to just what is the cause. And I just kind of laugh about that. I mean, because it's either you laugh or cry, because that's not true. We have the ability, again, to use logic and to say it is never going to be, you are always going to have a problem when you leave this stuff out in the open, when you let it get into a creek and then kids go playing in a creek. You are always going to see this kind of result, this kind of consequence. And for someone to say, well, but we can't prove it, I just think that's the most ridiculous comment in the world. If you can't prove it, it's because you don't want to prove it.
Right. What did Dr. Helen Caldicott, and by the way, I want to thank you so much for helping organize bringing Dr. Caldicott to St. Louis. I am not even finished with that video. I have, I plan on during spring break, I'm going to piece out and make little sub videos of Dr. Caldicott and Bob Alvarez and just put them up on my channel, because I've never seen Dr. Caldicott or Dr. Alvarez so furious. I've watched almost every single symposium they've attended, and I have never heard them straight out be so angry.
Well, I can't take any credit for bringing them in. That was Dr. Wendy Veerhoff and awesome. Wildwood Community College, and some other people helped put that together. We were invited by Dr. Veerhoff to help attend. And that, I've never met Dr. Caldicott before. I have met Bob Alvarez before, but I had watched videos of her because I wanted to get an idea of who she was. And I think you're right. I mean, she was pretty worked up, and it was a pretty intense tour that she was taken on Friday. I think it lasted like 4.5, maybe 5 hours, and we just went from site to site to site. And we tried to pull as many people as we could who were involved or who lived on the streets, who were, who had, obviously Karen grew up in St. Cyr Park. So
You're
she was
talking about Karen Nichols.
Yeah, Karen Nichols grew up in St. Cyr Park, and that was the street, she played in the park that they're finding radiation in right now and are currently cleaning. So she was able to talk about that, point out her house, talk about, the things that she would do in the area growing up. And then Mary Osco was there and was able to give her story. We tried to give Helen real people because although I think she could have done, she could have driven past the sites and we could have just handed her documents. As she's a pediatrician, I think she needs to understand, she needs to see the hurt. She needs to see the devastation that this caused in people's lives. And I think it worked because I think that she was able to get up the next day and really just let loose with the emotion and the anger.
Yeah, well, it was really kind of stunning, but you know what? It's justifiable. That's kind of how I feel every Monday when I'm on. This is one of the things when I talk to people about the people of St. Louis. A lot of people ask me, well, why don't they just move away? Why don't they just pack up and move their kids and go somewhere else? I mean, I'm sure you guys asked that question.
It's back to the quote that you read earlier. You know what? Yes. Do I want to get out of here? Oh, absolutely. I want to go somewhere safe, and no, I don't know where that is. And I struggle with where is a safe place to raise my kids. But you know what? For whatever reason, I don't know if you believe in God or whatever, flip of a coin, this fell into my lap, and it fell into the lap of hundreds of other moms in St. Louis. And do we think that that's unfair at times? Yeah. When I get served on a Thursday evening, it feels very unfair. Why me? But you know what? It happened. And we're not going to stop until we close the door on this situation. Now that we know it's our responsibility and it is not ethical for me to leave this for another mom to handle. That is not ethical, and that is the way that is why we have a 70-year-old problem here in St. Louis that's been allowed to go for 70 years, because that sort of thing, the passing off of the baton, as people fight this and as they get older and as they get ill, yes, it's okay to pass the baton and have other people pick it up. But you know what? When it becomes too much to bear and you walk away from it, I have a problem with that. I really do. You have to, if enough people are involved in this issue, then it isn't so much for one mom or two or three moms to bear. And that's what we have happening. We have a whole other group forming, Lonnie, that I'm so excited. Actually, I think we have two forming that I'm so excited about. We have a MAP group forming who is going to tackle just the emissions. They're working on just the emissions, and I think Drew Kuhn has been on your show.
Right.
Drew is heading that up, and I'll tell you, that is such a burden lifted, because that is not something, it is absolutely something that needs to be looked at, because there could be radiation leaving the site through the emissions and the flare system. But there are so many little moving pieces that we can't put our thumb on just one of them right now. So Drew's formed, and he's starting to tackle that issue, and he's starting to tackle the Nixon issue, which is huge.
The Nixon issue. What's the Nixon issue?
The Governor Nixon issue, the lack of response from our governor.
Why he refuses to even acknowledge. I've called his office several times. They keep saying, well, the governor just does not see it as a problem.
I know.
He doesn't see it as a problem. And I asked him, I said, you're telling me the governor does not see it as a problem. There are families living within 1 mile of a leaking nuclear dump site.
Right.
And they're like, no, ma'am, we think that, we've been told that it's safe for people to live there. That's what Now, who tells them that is a good question. And this is my other thing that I have not asked you about, because we've been focusing on our elected officials. What about the Department of Energy? I have not asked you about this. The Department of Energy and the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. What is their response? Aren't they responsible for this mess? Aren't they the ones ultimately responsible for the nuclear pollution since they created it?
Absolutely, and they know they are, and they know that we found documents now that directly link them. For a while they were saying, yeah, but this was bought by a commercial company, and then they were naughty with it. The problem is that they didn't license this material correctly. This should never have been put up to bid, and we have the proof now. We could absolutely pull them in by their ears, the NRC and the DOE and all of them. They are responsible for Westlake landfill, no doubt about it.
Well, how do we pull them in by their ears?
Well, that's where we are right now. How do you... we have the proof now, and we've shown the proof to the elected officials. It's a darn shame that Jay Nixon won't let two moms or Drew or anyone else come in and sit down with him, because he could stand to be educated a little bit more on this issue. And as embarrassing as it is to have soccer moms come in and tell you about a nuclear dump, we have succeeded in turning and changing the minds of countless elected officials. We've gotten 2 bills introduced, 1 passed, because they have taken the time to meet with us, and we have shown them. That is what we'd like the opportunity to do with Jay Nixon, but obviously he keeps slamming the door. But back to the DOE and NRC, that is the question. How do you make the federal government do what it is absolutely dug its heels in and said that it won't do? I mean, somebody needs to be accountable to these people. Somebody has to be able to put their thumb on them, and that's the difficult thing. Right now, the elected officials here, they've written letters saying, you own this, come back and get it. And the response is, no thanks, we disagree. I mean, literally, it is very, very difficult and very scary as a mom to watch letters like that go out and the responses, because at the end of the day, even the senators and the congressmen, it feels as though they have no control, and they lack the ability to force these arms of government to do the right thing.
Has anybody been in touch with Ernest Moniz, Secretary Ernest Moniz of the DOE? Has there been any letters gone to him and any response back from him?
Yes, that letter that I just described, where we found new information showing that this material, it was illegal for the federal government to put this up for bid in the first place, and to ever give it to a private company. And even then, they had a standing law, which is still the standing law of the nation, that if they do put material up for bid and another company buys it, if that company does something illegal with it or dangerous with it, the DOE is still the regulator. They have to come in and immediately, and it says shall, immediately come in and recall the material. So they had the legal authority once this material was dumped at Westlake landfill, Lonnie, years ago, over 40 years ago. They had the legal authority to go in and dig it up and remove it and recall it, and to make the company pay for it.
Are you saying that Moniz's office wrote you back and said, sorry, we disagree with you on that?
Yep.
That it's not
I didn't write the note. Actually, 4. So 2 senators, a Democrat and a Republican, and 2 members of Congress, a Democrat and a Republican. 4 signatures, bipartisan as you can get, sent to Ernest Moniz saying, hey, this is your mess. We want you to come in here. It may be a super fun site for the chemicals, but you guys own the radioactive waste, and you need to get in here and get your crew in here. And his response back was, thank you, but we disagree. Have a nice day.
Well, so his phone number is 202-586-5000. That is the Department of Energy, and people that are listening to this ought to be calling. And let me give you the phone number also of Congressman Pallone's office, Frank Pallone, because he needs to hear from us. And his phone number is 202-225-4671, because this is the thing. We can't just let them say no to us. This is up to us to make them realize that we are not backing down. The reason that they continue to brush us off is exactly that. They want to brush us off and go, they'll just let the people of St. Louis just start dropping off like flies, which is frankly what they're doing. It's shocking, the death rate. And I actually call this murder. This is murder for them to ignore this. Well,
that's what Dr. Helen Caldicott said too, and I would say this. I don't know if Frank Pallone's listening, but he's got a record of being a good guy, and I would just say, listen, as somebody that has gone through thousands of documents, Do not let yourself be the one person who puts a community in harm's way. You have the ability now, everybody else agrees but you for whatever reason that this needs to go through this bill. You're the only one stopping this bill. Therefore, your name will be the only name on it when something bad happens. You will forever be known as the person that killed this bill. And I refuse to believe that that is anything that he wants on his resume. So, we're going to continue to call. We're having everybody call, teachers, rabbis, nuns, and I would just encourage you to call. Make it a habit. Make yourself a cup of coffee or whatever you drink in the morning. Call him once a day.
Yeah, exactly. Just call him and that is really the key. And call Governor Jay Nixon's office every day. I mean,
I set a timer.
I mean, do you really set a timer?
I do. I have a timer. I do. I have a timer on that I set. I try and give myself an hour between phone calls if I can, so that I can get other stuff done around the house. And yeah, my timer goes off, and then I look and I say, okay, who's next on my list to call?
How many people would you say in St. Louis are actively engaged in attempting to make this? To push this along a lot faster than what it's being done?
I would say easily thousands. I mean, there are a lot of people that are actively involved. And some of them, we've got other groups forming now to tackle the other pieces of this. So, I mean, I'm really excited about that.
Well, what do you mean other pieces? What other pieces?
Well, I mean, there's the health consequence of it. So there's, what's happening in North County and Coldwater Creek and all of that contamination. So there's a group, the Coldwater Creek Just the Facts Please group is tackling that. We're over here, we've got Westlake, and we've got the fire. Now Drew's group, MAP, is helping with the emissions, which is great. We have Weldon Springs. We have downtown Malincrot. We have other sites in St. Louis where this waste was mismanaged, just like it was in Coldwater Creek. None of them have a fire next to them, but, people have suffered at those sites as well. It's harder to reach out. This is a legacy city, and these sites are not far from each other. They're a stone throws distance from each other, and we're all part of this horrible Manhattan Project family tree now, and we need other people to help reach out.
Yeah, I was thinking about you this morning as I was getting dressed, thinking about how really World War II has not ended. And really, the people of St. Louis are still suffering, only the weapons are being dropped on St. Louis.
That's right. And, when we say that, whatever your feeling of the atomic bombs and the dropping of them, that's your own personal feeling. But for us, there are still people in St. Louis dying from... and they are casualties. Technically, these people are casualties of World War II.
Yeah.
They really should be offered a soldier's burial.
Or maybe
this is a patriotic issue here.
Yeah, well, this is I think maybe this is my guess as to why there's a complete denial on the whole thing, is that they recognize that if they really were to acknowledge this site, that there are probably, if not hundreds, thousands of sites all across.
And we know that, that is very true, and each site is unique and has its own little unique thing going on, but at the end of the day, it is from the same process. We have to remember that we're unique, and we have to acknowledge that we're different, but we also have to remember that we are connected and similar. And I feel like if everyone were to just hold hands across the nation, from Hanford and all these other little sites, and, I hate to say wake up the moms and dads and aunts and uncles, but yeah, wake up people. It would be very difficult. That would present a very difficult battle for the federal government to have to contend with.
Well, this is, in fact, why they don't wake. I mean, I think people are awake. Like this weekend, I went out and protested. It's called Public Interest Environmental Law Conference that happens every year here in Eugene, Oregon. Do you know there was not one panel about the negative effects of pollution, the radiation pollution across our country. We have St. Louis, we have Zion, the nuclear power plant in Zion, we have Indian Point. Right here in our own neck of the woods last month, the DOE basically penalized Hanford $35 million for leaving plutonium waste openly. It's been blowing out for months. They just discovered they've been blowing out plutonium all over the desert up there.
My God. And, when you think about that, you know what? There are really bad chemicals in this world. There are a lot of very dangerous things in this world, lead being one of them. You don't want children exposed to lead. But people, when you think about plutonium and you understand that one particle of plutonium causes cancer, you just cannot wrap your head around how dangerous what you just described is and the consequences that we're going to see 20 and 30 years from now from just this one thing that they announced last week.
That's right. And this is the thing. But people really, I went to like the open mic, and I am going to request a panel. I'm going to start working it closed this weekend. I'm filling out the paperwork this week. I am going to request a panel on this because this conversation it's our lack of responsibility that has allowed this to continue, which is kind of like goes down to Mr. Frank Pallone.
It really is, and this won't get better on its own. And you know this because you've been looking at situations like this for a long time. Because these situations never fix themselves, and they have to have a fix. 10 years from now, if this situation isn't fixed, it's going to cost double what it's going to cost tomorrow to fix it, and we're still going to be having this conversation. Ultimately, we have to fix these sites, and it is going to cost us money. But it is never going to be cheaper than it is today. Tomorrow is going to be a little bit more expensive, and it's going to keep adding up. There was a time, Lonnie, this is what really blows my mind. So the price tag for Westlake is probably, I don't even want to guess. I mean, it's up there. It's got to be $250 million, I'm sure, or more. But there was a time when the NRC, in the old documents, where they actually calculated what it would have cost to remove the waste back in the 70s, right after it was first dumped. And it was about $2 million. $2 million. If someone would have spent, and then, that was a lot of money in the 70s, but $2 million would have prevented what we're seeing today around Westlake Landfill.
I think it goes less to the idea of how much it actually cost on than to really the whole, the political implications. It would kill, if they admitted these problems, it would kill the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry is on its last leg. It's hobbling, and governments are still funding it no matter. It's the only industry that does not sustain itself. It's only because our governments. Now, before we get off the air, I want to make sure I ask you this. When you say that Westlake Landfill, the fire is quickly encroaching, I've been saying that the fire is, about 1,000 feet. Do we know how far it is from the pollution?
We don't. We're hearing 700 to 800 feet to 1,000 feet. There is this moving number, and that's really frustrating. People throw out a moving number, right? It changes every day. It's like a magic number. The thing that I tell everyone is that it's a fire, you guys. I mean, it's like trying to measure. It's like watching a house catch on fire and trying to measure. Okay, well, how many inches is it from the bathroom now? Well, no, it's up in the attic now, so we can't see it. This is a fire that is 6 football fields wide, 250 feet deep. And it's expanding on all fronts.
Well, did Dr. Caldecott say to you what would happen? Like, if this thing does catch fire to the nuclear pollution, what would that look like, and how will people know? Maybe it already is.
Well, that's the thing. Unless this fire comes above ground, you're not going to know that it's actually hit. The actual system that they have set up on this landfill to suck out all the chemicals in the VOCs from the combustion will actually turn around and be used against the site. Because if this fire hits the radioactive waste underground, that suction and the collection of these emissions and directing them to the big giant flare system, I mean, they pretty much have an incinerator on site right now burning off all these VOCs and these chemicals. You and I, radiation does not burn. You cannot destroy radiation. So what you've done is you've created a system that right now is trying to protect the community and trying to burn off as much as it can, although it's not working properly. But in the event that the two meet, this system could actually suck along with those emissions, those particles, up into the flare system and launch them out the top into the community. So you would have a silent situation where you wouldn't know. Now, obviously, if the fire comes above ground, then you're going to see it, and you're going to see the smoke and whatnot, and it's going to release it into the air. But there is every possibility that these two could meet underground, and that you're not going to see a mushroom cloud. Instead, you're going to see particulates, thorium-230 from the Manhattan Project being launched out of flares and being launched into the surrounding communities.
So maybe that is why, I hate to put it like this, but it sounds like maybe that's partly why they don't want to admit it. Maybe it's already, is there any way to know when that would be happening? Is it just a crapshoot, for a guessing game for people in St. Louis?
The only way that you would know that it would happen, they have areas right now where they know where the radiation is sitting. They have those mapped. There's a lot of unknown areas, and you and I know that if radiation is able to move 50 feet off-site onto someone else's property, then it's able to move 50 feet while it's on-site. So if this waste has sat there for 40 years, it's migrated off-site. I truly believe that to some extent, but I also believe that it's also migrated on-site. So either it was dumped in a different area or it migrated there through the groundwater and through the garbage and through the wind. There is a possibility it could be burning now, and unfortunately I think that we have asked, and so have the elected officials, everybody has asked for EPA to test the middle area, the area that is right next to the fire right now, for radiation. And the answer we're getting is no. They have refused.
They are not going to test. You're telling me the EPA is refusing to see what is going on there?
Yes, ma'am. They will not test 200 feet in front of this fire. So if this fire has 1,000 feet to go before it hits radioactive waste, our solution was, that's great, test 100 feet in front of it. Test 100 feet in front of it and see what's sitting there.
So why did they say no, Dawn? What's their reasoning?
Well, you and I think because they're afraid of where they're going to find it. Because to date, every place that they've sunk a shovel, they found it on site. They are afraid that this waste is closer. And I'll give you another example, and this should scare everybody. While they were, and they're still trying to control this fire, they're trying to put in these wells, these cooling wells and these temperature wells so that they can watch the progression. The state's Attorney General, Chris Koster, asked the company Republic and EPA, as they were digging wells in front of where the fire is, he asked for the dirt from those wells. He said, okay, so you're digging in the ground anyway. I'd like some of that dirt. We'd like to have that dirt tested. And they went to court in front of a judge and put their feet down and said no.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. So, that's logical, right? Okay, let's make a law. Let's make it a rule. Any place you dig a hole on this landfill, the dirt that comes out needs to be tested. The state of Missouri and our Attorney General tried to do that. That was a great logical thing. And they were flat out denied.
So the judge sided with... The judge said no?
No, I think the judge eventually came back and said yes, but after a month of going back and forth, they had already gotten rid of the samples. And so, this is the game that's being played here, Lonnie.
And because of the Price-Anderson Act, nobody goes to jail. They can do pretty much whatever they want.
That's right. So that is my thing. You know what? If there is nothing to be afraid of, if there is nothing to worry about, then prove it. And every time we're asking them to prove it, they're telling us no. There is no reason why EPA can't go out there tomorrow and make them test in a grid the entire North Quarry. So right from where the fire is, all the way up to the radiation. Let's see how clear that path is of radiation. Let's see how far the radiation really is. It's not how far the fire is from the radioactive waste at this point. It's how far is the radioactive waste from the fire, if you get my drift.
Wow. That is so outrageous. And so the EPA is just straight out refusing?
They have refused, and they've done so. I will send you a video. They've done it in a public meeting. Straight up refused. We will not grid test the North Quarry.
Why?
Refused.
And what is their refusing? Why do they? What do
they don't
say?
have a reason. They won't even give one. I mean, and honest to God, I will send you a video. This is public record. This is how ridiculous. This is why we want them removed from control of this site. This is the type of answer. If you don't give a reason for an answer like that, then you leave the community and everyone else to guess. And my guess is because they're afraid. Because they are afraid that there is radioactive waste even closer to the fire than we know. I mean, that is life around this site. When you get an answer like that from a federal agency, yeah, as a mom, you start to panic because there's no logical reason why they wouldn't.
Well,
obviously,
I know
the state of Missouri agreed.
When you guys went to D.C., Gina McCarthy refused to talk to you, correct?
Right.
And she's the head of the EPA. Did you get in touch with any of her staff members or anybody willing to talk to you at all?
Nope. 2 people came out and took, we had a little book for her with like all of our kids and stuff and talking about bloody noses and what it's like to live next to this site. We gave it to 2 staff members who quickly retreated back behind doors. But we didn't. It's one thing for someone to call and say, no, we will not meet with you. Lonnie, we didn't even get a response. We didn't even get a no, we won't meet with you, no, we're unable to meet. We didn't get a response, which is the most ridiculous and frankly, it's above rude. It's inconsiderate.
Well, it really tells you what they think. I mean, in the intro into my show, I say that we are assets on a balance sheet. We're not human beings. We are considered useless feeders. And Gina McCarthy really, honestly, has never seen a nuclear site she didn't love. There's a reason why she's heading the EPA. She could have done a lot. She was on board when, she took over after Jasko quit from the Fukushima disaster when Jasko was jumping up and down. The Commissioner Jasko was basically kicked off the NRC because he wanted to do something about warning the people of the United States about Fukushima. She went in and basically, clicked her heels and said Sig Heil. So, this is the thing that people need to understand. The reason that Hitler was able to destroy millions and millions of people during World War II is because of administrators exactly like Gina McCarthy. And I know that's a harsh statement, but that's exactly how I feel. It's my opinion only. But I believe that she's part of the real fascist problem that is protecting the financial interests of the corporations over our Constitution. Our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness has been destroyed by the nuclear industry. And
I tell everybody, because I have to say, too, 3 years ago when I started this, I mean, I was naive, and I probably am to some extent still, but I literally thought, Karen Nickel and I thought, okay, we found some problems. This site is bad. All we have to do, we thought we would just be involved in this for like 2-3 weeks, right? That we would just call the EPA, point out their mistakes, they'd fix them, and then...
Thank you for letting us know, Dawn, and we'll get right on it.
That's exactly, and I have to tell you, it isn't as though we didn't try. For people who hear this and think, wow, these people like to beat up on EPA and the federal government, you got to know, we tried. It was infuriating and so frustrating because I thought, I've got to be not phrasing these questions right. I thought, we have got to not, there's something wrong with our communication on our end.
Right.
And that didn't turn out to be the case at all. And I just want people to understand that there is no logic, and it feels right now, it feels very much like EPA is kind of a damage control agency, that they are put in place to minimize damages but apologize for other situations. They are not proactive on this site or any site.
They're part of the gaslighting. Americans have been gaslit. And gaslighting, let me remind my listeners, this is a technical definition of gaslighting. It's a form of mental abuse in which information is twisted or spun, selectively omitted to favor the abuser, or provide false information, or false information is presented with the intent of making victims doubt their own memory, perception, sanity.
And I've got a great example of that. So when we first started here at Westlake, we had this wonderful PR lady who'd been at EPA for a long time, was close to retiring, and boy, she was stone cold ice for a while. But as we started calling and really talking to her about this, and as we started showing her what we were finding, she started to change. And, you know, she actually at the end became one of our strongest advocates, and then she left and retired, not without taking a senator's aide aside at her last meeting and saying, listen, this is serious. I don't care what anyone says to you. This side isn't, you know. But they replaced her with a guy who, come to find out, he served his country in the war overseas, and he was responsible for doing like memorial videos for fallen soldiers.
Huh.
So they replaced her with a guy who has seen the worst of the worst and is absolutely immune to emotion. And he's very much a take orders and do it type of guy.
Where did he serve?
I want to say it was Iraq or someplace like that,
so
overseas.
He himself has no doubt been exposed to severe nuclear pollution. We've been dropping depleted we carpet bombed Iraq and Afghanistan with depleted uranium weapons, and our soldiers coming back are having genetic birth defects with their children. Their wives are getting cancer. This is why we have such... Leon Panetta alluded to it when he was leaving office, but they know that this is partly why we have an increase in suicides among our veterans.
Right.
So
and,
this is it's the silent killer that... See, this is the thing, Dawn. You and I, we're talking about something that the government desperately wants silenced. Desperately. They have bought every university, every media. The military owns this, and it really is about them controlling the narrative. And every agency out there that we believed was there to defend us is not there to defend us. It's there to defend the interests of the corporations.
Wow. And, you know, that's the frustrating thing. I just would say this to the listeners. You know what? If we can do it, you can do it. There is nothing special about us other than we're loud and we're kind of pissed off at this point, and we're trying to protect our kids.
The fact is your lives are being threatened. Your children have already been affected. They may not present the negative effects of radiation yet, but look at the people in your community who are now 45, 50, 60 years old. Look at even Wendy Lametta, who looks healthy, unable to bear children. She's having her life is livable, but she's impacted to the point where she could not have children. And on top of that, her and her husband spent thousands of dollars trying to have a baby, when really, if some doctor would have said, look, you grew up next to a nuclear radioactive dump site and the likelihood is you're sterile, they wouldn't have poured tens of thousands of dollars into trying to have a baby.
No, and we hear that a lot. Nobody knew. And that's the thing, is that the basic... I mean, that's a violation of your human rights. You have... And not only that, but... people need to know what they live next to for other reasons like you just described. They need to be able to go to their doctors and have that put in their medical chart.
Right.
You know, because most doctors, if they knew about it, they would be more aggressive with that patient and more proactive. You know, maybe, you know what I'm saying? It's so frustrating, because some of this, if caught early, can be treated. And I think that is a good example of lives destroyed and harmed. I mean, this has... That is a terrible cost for someone to pay,
and it's
just because you happen to grow up next to a creek that the federal government let all this waste leak into. I mean, and that is what we're seeing. These people have done nothing wrong, Lonnie. They have done, in fact, they are the best people you could ask for. They are law-abiding citizens. All they did is they just happen to live in the wrong place.
I'm going to jump in. We've got 20 seconds left. I want to thank you for joining us on Monday. I hope you will come back. Put your courage feet on. Please contact Congressman Pallone's office, 202-225-4671. Put your courage feet on. Please call him. We need to move this legislation out. Thanks for joining us, Wendy. We'll talk. Dawn.